When it comes to buying old cars, knowledge is power. I wish I could share you some of the many success stories I've had over the years in buying old cars when the person thought that it needed major repair and it ended up only needing a minor fix. One in particular I remember, this was over 15 years ago, I purchased a absolute pristine 78 300 CD coupe, 150,000 miles from the original owner, and the engine was running rough and it was smoking, and they had been told by two, the dealer and an independent mechanic, that the engine would need to be overhauled. Well, to make a long story short, I drove the car home and found out that the owner had put gasoline in the car instead of diesel, and that was causing all the problems, all the symptoms that the owners thought their engine was worn out. So let's talk about another one that just recently happened. I purchased this 1968 280 SEL. It's a 108 chassis with a manual 4-speed, kind of a rare car. And the owner had kind of given up on it because he said the transmission wouldn't shift. It would not go into reverse, and it was a big problem trying to get, you could go into first and second, but very difficult trying to get it into third or fourth gear. So we pulled the transmission out. Even before we pulled the transmission out, I had a hunch that it probably was not a transmission. Why? Because of the knowledge of having worked around these old Mercedes and other old cars. A lot of times shift problems on these old manual transmissions are not internal to the transmission. And sure enough, when we got this transmission out and I started looking at all these rods, this is, by the way, is a real fascinating feat of engineering. You know, you have this rod that connects here to this shift pin, and then you've got the shifter mounted over here, and you've got these support rods that come up and hook to the bottom of this plate. And it's got a lot of monkey motion to it when you go to shift, and there's a lot of movement in all those rods and arms. And guess what happens when all the bushings wear out? That's right. That's exactly what happened on this transmission. We had a bunch of old bushings that we took out. Look at them all. That's all the bushings that come out of this mechanism. Some of them just fell out in my hand. They were so rotten. The primary bushings, which are located here, are made out of plastic, and they hold this main shift rod tight. You can see how it's so tight that it's hard to even get on, and this is what controls the shift there. Well, those were totally shot. So you could see the shifter was moving around, and it was not moving this shift rod going into the transmission plate. So I'm convinced now that after looking inside the transmission, you know, while we had the transmission out, we replaced the pressure plate and the throwout bearing. But I can almost guarantee you that when we put this transmission back in the car, it's going to shift just fine. So this is another example. You know, when you go out there and go on the hunt for these old cars, knowledge is power. Learn how everything works. Understand the different symptoms and what causes them, and sometimes you can pick up a real deal.